What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V, and we got more 2023 Colorado high school football season previews here on this series. Man, we've covered, or we will be covering, every single 11-man football team, 1A through 5A, talking about all of them, where we talk about last year, their records, playoffs, all that great stuff. Talk about players they are losing, whether it's by graduation or transfer. And then we also talk about key players to look out for this year for each of those squads that will affect their success, along with predicting that success, their record, and giving each team a window of wins here, trying to project the best we can, how well a team will do going into this season here, this 2023 fall season coming up. And so on this episode, we got 10 teams, covering a lot of teams here, all the way from Aurora to a lot of Denver teams here to a couple, Parker teams as well. So a pretty wide range here, but mostly 4A and 5A teams on this one. And before we hop into it, I have done this for every single season preview that I've done. So make sure you check out some of the previous season previews that dropped, and also check out Cody and Gideon's season previews as well. But on my season previews, I like to give a quick breakdown of where my predictions were from last year, as I did predict the records for a lot of these squads here. I gave an exact prediction record, and then I also gave a window of wins, trying to figure out, all right, well, what games are winnable, what games are losable, what games could go either way to, get a, make a ballpark, right, for each squad when it comes to that. And so, out of the 10 teams that I am covering on this episode, which, by the way, I'm covering Regis Jesuit, Chaparral, Denver East, Far Northeast, Hinkley, Overland, Prairie View, Rangeview, Legend, and Ponderosa. Alright, so those are the 10. 3 out of the 10 were within the window of wins that I predicted from last year. So, they're in the ballpark when I talked about them and predicted their record going into that 2022 season. They finished within where I expected them to finish here, inside the ballpark, I like to say, right? And then there's 4 additional teams here that weren't quite in the ballpark, but were definitely in the neighborhood here. They were just one game outside of the window of wins, so not too far off, obviously. I mean, most of these windows of wins are 3 or 4 game ranges here, so it wasn't that crazy, right? So there you go there. And then, honestly, I'm going to admit, I was wrong. There were 3 teams out of the 10 on this episode that I was wrong about. These were probably, I'd say 2 of them were teams that I was definitely the most wrong about when doing all of my predictions. Hey, look, I'm human. Also, I'm doing 100 plus predictions over teams 1A through 5A. So, honestly, when you look at all the stats together, it's not that bad. 3 out of 10, I'll take that. I'll take that. Definitely not the majority there. So there you go there. As I go team by team, I will talk about what teams were who. So there you go. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this one. Okay, starting out strong, though, we're talking about Regis Jesuit here last year in the regular season. Went 6-4 here. And so that was within one game of the window of wins that I predicted for them last year. I actually had them going 8-2 with the window of wins anywhere between 7 to 9 wins, but instead they finished just below that 7 mark at 6-4, which is a little surprising here. But, let's go game by game here, talking about their schedule. To start out, they beat Valor Christian 23-17 in overtime. That was a game that I correctly predicted there. I said at the time it might be controversial, but that's a game that they could definitely win, as Valor does have a new head coach, and they are still trying to figure some things out there, at least to start the season, right? And so, boom, got that one right off the bat. But then they play Oaks Christian. I thought that was definitely a winnable game there. I mean, Valor played them the year before and blew them out. But then Regis played them, and then they lost to them in a real close one, 34-28. that's a winnable game. Honestly, that's definitely a winnable game. You probably wanted that one back. But they come back home here. They play Arapahoe, beat them 23-10 as expected. And then they play Ralston Valley. I did say this would be an interesting team. Not sure what to expect, but this was another team with a first-year head coach here. And it's only September 15th at this point. And that's actually a game they lose in a close one, 29-28. So there you go. 2 games that I felt like they could win right off the bat. They lose in close ones. So there you go. After that, the rest of their schedule pretty much goes how I predicted. Lost to Cherry Creek 42-14. I was at that game. That one felt a lot closer than 42 than 14. It felt a lot closer than 42-14, at least going into the fourth quarter, right? So there you go. Blew out Douglas County 41-7. And then they played Pine Creek. This was another game I was at. I thought this might have been a loss for them. But, they blew out Pine Creek 28-7. This was actually a close game. Pine Creek just made a lot of bad mistakes here. And, against a team like Regis, if you're going to give them, layups, then they're going to take those layups, right? So, there you go. They take care of business there. Then they beat Chapa 56-28. Beat Legend 26-11 there. And then go ahead. And they play Fountain Fort Carson here at the end of the season. I did say that Fountain Fort Carson game might be a trap game. And they end up losing that one 21-14. So there you go. Playoffs were pretty much set at this point. But, I was still right. It was a trap game. And they lost that one 21-14. I really did think that they should have lose that one, I should say. But they did. And so out of the 2 losses that I predicted for them, I thought that they would lose to they'd lose to both Cherry Creek and Pine Creek, I want to say. That's what I thought. And then I thought the Fountain Fort Carson game would be a trap game, which would drop them to 7. So there you go. But instead, they lost one more game than expected here. They had some close ones between Ralston Valley and Oaks Christian. I kind of feel like they could have won both of those. So still in the ballpark here, or in the neighborhood at least, not completely off. They would go to the playoffs, play Fossil Ridge, and they would take care of business, defeating them 63-28. Then they would play Valor Christian. This was a cold one here. Record lows, actually, in November. This was one of 2 games. That's right, 2 games in the state of Colorado that Friday night that was being played. The rest of them got canceled. And I remember that because I was at home watching this on a live stream here as they would lose kind of in a close one here. I thought it was close to Valor 45-28. I kind of wonder, if things would have been different maybe if it was warmer, but I don't know if that would have been the case. Regardless, they lost to Valor here, who would go to state and would push Cherry Creek. So that's a tough go there. But altogether, not a bad season by Regis Jesuit. They did beat Valor at the beginning, which was huge for them. I do kind of think, if they beat Oaks Christian and Ralston, maybe they're rolling a little bit more going into that Cherry Creek game. Maybe that's a little bit closer. I don't know if that would have changed a whole lot, but, regardless, 7-5 altogether on the season, lost in the second round of the playoffs. It definitely could be worse if you are Regis Jesuit. But, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about some graduating seniors here. This is a solid senior group, honestly. First off, they lose their quarterback, Xander Carroll. He threw for 1,958 yards, 23 touchdowns to 7 picks, while rushing for 607 yards and 7 touchdowns. He was a multi-year starter. He was a dual threat for them. So, he was their second leading rusher, actually, at 607 yards and 7 touchdowns there. So that's kind of a tough replace. It's not every day you could just replace a dual threat like that put up production like that. So that's definitely tough. In addition, they also lose, it looks like, their backup running back here in Aiden Chase. He had 547 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns. So that's their second and third leading rusher that is just gone right there. So there you go there. They also lose DeAndre Barnes, the speedy receiver / corner. He was the lead guy at receiver with 37 receptions for 787 yards and 9 touchdowns. And also on defense, he had 55 tackles and a team high 6 interceptions. They also lose their second lead receiver in Dylan McCullough. He had 40 receptions for 618 yards and 7 touchdowns there. So losing multiple skill players here for sure, though that's definitely not easy. But it kind of continues as they also lose Andrew Metziger here. Make sure you check out our interview with him. He's going to Kansas State, I believe. So, wishing him all the best of luck. He had 334 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns on only 25 receptions there. He was a big body target for them. I felt like they could have probably used him a little bit better, but whatever. It was what it was, right? I mean, he's gone now, so there you go. But that's not exactly an easy body to replace. Now, going over to the defense, there are some guys that we got to talk about here, starting with Hayden Lewis. He made our top 5 edge rusher list here, but I believe he will be more of like a inside linebacker type over at Michigan, which is where he committed, I believe. And, despite battling some injuries, especially near the end there, he was the lead tackler in Colorado, period, I'm pretty sure. He had 197 tackles when all was said and done, 17 tackles for loss, and 7 sacks. He's definitely someone whose presence will be missed, as he was extremely productive, throughout the season. So that's a tough one for sure. Plus he also played edge rusher as well. So there you go. And I want to throw this out there. I want to say Metziger played a little bit of edge rusher too. So you're losing some edge rushers. They also lose starting middle linebacker Nate Lewis, who had 111 tackles of his own. So between those two players, you're losing almost 300 tackles, which is a lot. And those are only 2 players there. So there you go. That also doesn't include Joshua Harvey, who was a good starting corner. Will be moving on to play on the next level. He had an additional 64 tackles for Regis. He also had, I guess he didn't have any interceptions, but regardless, still losing him. They're also, I want to throw this player in here. They're losing Josiah Harris here. He's another cornerback. He had 93 tackles, and he also had a pretty solid amount of interceptions, second leading in interceptions with 3. So, just a lot of production they're losing here. Altogether, I mean, on paper, it doesn't look that bad. They're losing 6 of their top 13 tacklers, but they are losing 3 of their top 5 leading tacklers here, who combined for over 300 tackles. And they're also losing their sack and interception leaders as well on defense. So definitely, some really good production that you're replacing. It's not going to be super easy to just replace 300 tackles between 2 guys like that. So there's that. And, all the sacks you're losing, as well as all the interceptions you're losing as well. I actually don't believe so they returned 1 guy who recorded an interception for them, just 1 interception for them last year. The other 11 interceptions that players had, they're all graduating. So there you go there. I mean, they're losing a lot, but hey, it is Regis Jesuit here, so you do gotta give them a little bit of credit. They're always gonna refill their ranks a bit quicker than some of the other squads. So let's talk about some guys that should be filling out the rest of this Regis Jesuit team and should be key going into this next season here, starting with the running back Albert Anthony Medina. As expected last year, he broke out as a junior and had 898 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns on 122 carries. That's 7.4 yards a pop there. And honestly, with almost every significant player gone but him, don't be surprised if they lean on him heavily to carry this offense here going into his senior year, by the way. And he's a good running back. I think he's a smooth running back. Could maybe work on his contact balance a little bit more here, but moving forward, definitely not the worst piece to be bringing back. I think he's somebody that you can rely on here and could potentially be a 1,500 yard rusher, at least. But, we'll just have to see moving forward. They also bring back Nico Auerbach. He actually made our watch list last year at safety, and in his junior year had a solid year, racking up 38 tackles. Look for him to turn up in his senior year with so many players, moving on, graduating, all that great stuff. But speaking of defenders here, they also bring back Lawson Douglas here, the 6'2", 180-pound corner. Last year he had 27 tackles, 5 pass deflections. Going into his senior year, there's 2 corners that graduated, so he should kind of get pushed up the depth chart here and be their main guy. A long, rangy corner should be a lot of fun to watch and a good corner for Regis here. Staying on the defensive side of the ball, they also bring back Kai Shelton, the 6'1", 200-pound linebacker, 8 as a sophomore. He was one of 3 guys, actually, to get over 100 tackles. He had 101 tackles, actually, and 5 tackles for loss. And so with some big tackle leaders gone, Hayden Moore and Lewis here, he should be the guy to help lead this Regis defense going forward at middle linebacker. For him to do all that as a sophomore, amazing. He has 2 great years ahead of him. I think he is one of the best linebackers in the state already. So there you go. They also bring back another sophomore linebacker in Jace Philemon. He was the second leading tackler at defensive end / edge rusher with 52 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. He also had an astounding 27 hurries. So look for him to be another big contributor moving forward, kind of helping fill out that edge rusher role there. And yeah, so there you go there. Oh, and sorry, one more player that I do want to talk about. He is on the offensive side of the ball. Haven't seen too much of him, but his name is Peyton Lindell here. He was the backup last year, so you kind of got to assume he will be the lead guy going into this year. We'll just have to see, moving forward. He only had 1 incompletion in the games he played. He was 10 for 11 for 100 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Did look at a little bit of his film here. I mean, he looks to be like a little bit of a dual threat. Solid athleticism there. We'll see how much he actually runs, though. And then a solid arm. He will be entering his junior year. I expect him to take over for Xander Carroll, or at least be one of the guys in competition to take over for him. So we'll just have to see what happens moving forward. But he's definitely not like an incompetent quarterback there. We'll just have to see how long he is brought and how that works out for them. So there you go. But let's go ahead and talk about the schedule here for Regis Jesuit. It is not easy. They play Valor on a Saturday to start here. We'll look to potentially make this game potentially here, but I think that's a loss here. Valor, I mean, they return a lot more guys. That's a lot more continuity. I mean, continuity matters when you play contenders, right? And so I think right now, early on in the season, that's not the greatest matchup. I think that's a loss. Now, if they played this a little bit later in the season, that could definitely be a different game for sure. But they're the first game, so there you go. Following that, they host a team. I am looking to make this one. It's on my birthday, actually, September 2nd here at 7 p.m. They host them at Regis here. That is Kennedy Catholic, a team from Washington who made a deep playoff run and are returning some real tough players here. Their quarterback forehand, as a sophomore, had a pretty good season, so he will be back. I think this is definitely a winnable game since it's at home, but it's also the second game of the season against a really good team that was a contender in Washington, who, at the moment I would say is more of a football state than Colorado. I mean, that'd be a great statement one to have, but I'm going to go on the safe side and say that is a loss. So there you go. 2 tough games right off the bat, but then they play Arapahoe the following week. away, but still, I think that's a dub. I think it'll be a closer game, but I could trust that they stick it out and find a way to get it done here. Play good defense, they got the guys for it, and then give the ball to Medina and try to open things up for Peyton Lindell there. And we'll just see what happens. But I think that should be a winnable one. But following that, they play Ralston Valley. That's another tough game. I think that's a loss. They lost to them barely last year, but with the squad returning some tough players, including Logan Madden, this defense is going to have to really step up and stop this offense here, and I just don't quite see it. So I think that's a win for Ralston Valley and a loss for Regis there. Following that, they play Cherry Creek. That's a loss. I think Cherry Creek, they are losing some players, but they still return a little bit more continuity than Regis. They return the quarterback, the running back, their entire offensive line except for Hank over there, I'm pretty sure. And then their defense, I think their defense will probably be fine. So there you go. But I think that's a loss. Then they played Douglas County. I think they beat him straight up, so that'll be key for sure there. Following that, they played Pine Creek. Last year, they hammered them, but it was just a bad game from Cameron Cooper, their quarterback, who just played uncharacteristically bad. I think that's the worst game he's ever played in his career. I don't think that's going to happen again, or at least it shouldn't. But I think this year, they won't be able to beat him. It should still be a close game. I think this game, more so than the Valor, Kennedy, Ralston, Cherry Creek game, should definitely be closer here. But we'll just have to see, right? And then they play Chaparral. That should be a dub. They play Legend here. That is a loss. Legend just has a lot of firepower returning, plus a really experienced defense stepping up. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't think they win that one. Following that, they play Fountain for Carson. Don't know why. They lost to them last year. I don't think they should have. But I don't think that's happening again, especially at the end of the season. This will be a key win to get them into the playoffs, as I do think Fountain for Carson is a playoff team as well. So if they beat them, which I think they can, then, they make it here. Will be a tough game for them regardless, but I do think this is a game they can win here, especially at the end. Your offense has had so much time to kind of put it together and whatnot. And Fountain for Carson's defense, they are losing some really important guys, so I don't know how well they're going to do against the run. And, hopefully by this point, Peyton Lindell could take a step forward as a passer and help them win this game. So altogether, I have Regis Jesuit finishing 4-6 with a window of wins between 2 and 6 here. This is one of the bigger ranges that I've ever given a team, because I'm not completely sure how well this team can play, especially against the teams that they are playing on this schedule here. There are maybe 1, 2. I think there are 2 teams on their schedule out of 10 that are not playoff teams. And the rest of these teams, except for 1 or 2 of them, should be top 10 seeds in the playoffs. So it's not an easy schedule at all. So definitely strength of schedule will help them out. The closer they get to 500, the better chances they have at making the playoffs. I think 4 wins is the bottom line that they need to get in order to make the playoffs. So there is that. But I don't know. They just have a lot to replace here, which makes me nervous. More so on offense. I'm more nervous about the offensive side of things than the defense, because you're losing receivers, you're losing your quarterback, right? That's not easy to replace here. You're losing backup running backs too, by the way, which will be important too, as you play some of these tougher teams that, really put a toll on your backups, on your running backs here and your backfield. So that's tough. It will not be easier. This will definitely be a younger Regis squad. Wouldn't be surprised if they get back to, over 500, 6 wins, 7 wins. But for now, they got a lot to prove, right? And I'm definitely nervous about this offense. So we'll just have to see. It's not that they don't have, talent, but they're playing top-tier talent around the state. They're playing some of the best teams in 5A around the state, easily, They're playing the top 5A teams, on their schedule between Valor, Ralston, Cherry Creek, Pine Creek, and Legend. So there you go. Also, then throw in Fountain Fort Carson, who is very good as well. Arapahoe, who will probably make the playoffs. Douglas County, they should beat, but they could potentially sneak into the playoffs. So, I don't know. Plus a contender from Washington. So this isn't an easy schedule. This is definitely, I would say, the toughest schedule out of any team in Colorado right now. So we'll just have to see how they respond. Okay, let's talk about Let's talk about Chaparral here in Parker. We'll talk about the other two Parker teams kind of later in the episode, but let's talk about this squad here. Oh boy, they went 1-9 last season, finishing one game below my predicted record and window of wins. I predicted them to go 2-9, but gave them a window of wins between 2 and 4. I understood this would be a rebuilding year, but man, they only won one game here, as it was really tough here. Also, they took Smoky Hill off their schedule last second, so I think that was the other game that I thought they could definitely, compete and potentially win here. But I guess let's just go down the line. They lose to Rocky Mountain 20-0. They played Ponderosa here, got embarrassed by them 44-6. I thought that would be a win, to be completely honest with you, but Pondo kind of proved me a little bit wrong, at least in this game there. They played Mountain Vista. I didn't think they were going to win that one, but they lost 52-21. Same with Rock Canyon, Thunder Ridge. Rock Canyon 35-6. Thunder Ridge was a close one, 21-9, but they really wanted to stick with Cooper Keir, which was a mistake. Then they played Legend, lost to them 41-0. Beat Douglas County 44-31, which I thought they could have won. I did predict as a loss, but I did say it will be a close game here and they should be pretty decent, but that's a big win there, beating them 44-31. Then played Regis Jesuit, lost to them 56-28. Got blown out by Fountain Fort Carson 46-9 and Pine Creek 45-10 there. So just a really tough season for them. Let's go ahead and talk about some graduating seniors, as it doesn't get easier. They graduate Braden Monroe, who's the UNC commit. That's a huge loss for them. He was the lead receiver with 77 receptions, which could be wrong, but that might be a high in Colorado. Or at least in last season, that might have been a high in receptions there. He could have been the leader in receptions in the state. But he also had 928 yards and 6 touchdowns on defense, had 38 tackles, 2 sacks. This is not an easily replaceable player, especially considering one of the games he played in. He just went crazy against Douglas County. Which we'll talk about later when predicting records and talking about this 2023 season. But that's definitely a tough loss. He's a great athlete for them. They also lose Camden Vaught. He was the best defensive player with 75 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 5 sacks as a sack leader, 7 interceptions as the interception leader. So that's not another guy that's not easily going to be replaced. They also lose Ben Flora, their second lead receiver, who brought in, a solid 34 receptions, 294 yards. Altogether, look, I'm not going to be able to talk about every single player, by the way. I'm just going to try to do this in broad strokes, as we do have 10 teams to talk about, so there you go. But altogether, they lose 10 of their top 14 tacklers here. They're all graduating. That includes 3 of their top 5 tackle leaders on defense, which wasn't a great defense, but you still want continuity here. They're losing Vaught, Moore, and Oregon here, so those are 3 guys that are gone. But on top of that, they're losing the majority of the guys really here, so that's definitely tough. But let's talk about some key players here, starting with Tevin Stokes. Got the keys as a freshman, and they kind of just let him loose here, which I did not mind at all. You got to learn some tough lessons in general. And, the incoming sophomore, he was one of the few freshmen to start multiple games as a quarterback. Started a lot of games, actually. And, he threw for 956 yards, 5 touchdowns to 13 interceptions. Now, I have seen him throw a couple of times here in the offseason. I do like what I see here. He should be better here On top of that, you kind of combined his, playing from his freshman year here. He was kind of just allowed to make some mistakes, which I don't mind at all. I'd rather him kind of try to throw this team into a game than out of one, right? Especially as a freshman, it's a rebuilding year. You got to learn these things. I think going forward, he should take a step forward, should have more touchdowns than picks, should be more, efficient here, taking care of the football just in general, honestly. He should take a step forward, and I also think he's one of the better quarterbacks, best young quarterbacks in Colorado too. So just keep an eye out. I mean, it's hard to start as a freshman, so moving forward here, I mean, just in general, it's hard to start. Your first year starting on varsity could always be rough, so there's that. So moving forward, you should get better, right? Now, they also bring back Keegan Swain. The incoming senior was the lead rusher with 339 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. May not be much, but adding an experienced skill player should help them out a little bit here. They did struggle to run the ball, I will note that. But, if the line could improve just a little bit here, I think Swain could kind of be leaned on and help relieve some of that pressure from Tevin Stokes, so he doesn't have to throw it all the time either here. So there you go there. They also returned Nolan Segal here. Hopefully I'm saying that right. If I'm not, I apologize. But the incoming junior was one of the lone linebackers and defensive players in general to be returning for them. He was second in tackles with 60. He also grabbed 3 interceptions, so he should be important for a team that is losing a good majority of their defense here. And then last but not least, we have Seth Olson, the big 6'7", 290-pound tackle. He hit a little bit of a growth spurt, it looks like, going into his senior year. And so it should be a huge part of this offense, as he will be by far the best lineman, their biggest one, their most movable guy here at left tackle, protecting Tevin's blind side here. He will be a watchless guy for sure. I think he's very talented and definitely somebody in consideration for top 5 seniors at the position. But, that position's always stacked. So we'll just have to see. But, you'll take a left tackle like Seth Olson here. So that should definitely help stabilize things on the offense. Give him some time, for sure. But let's look at the schedule here. They play Rocky Mountain here. Abe Shatilla will be coming back. He was tough to stop. I mean, against Chaparral, he went for 200-plus yards here. I think this is still a winnable game, no doubt, but they kind of need to overcome some of the size that Rocky Mountain brings back. I think they are just outside of Seth Olson, obviously, they are a little bit bigger all around here, and they bring back a little bit more continuity. I mean, they just really ran the ball against them. So if they can't stop the run, then that's a problem, right? And this is already a defense that is losing a lot against an experienced back. And so Tevin Stokes is going to need to turn up in this game. Not do too much, but he's going to have to lead some, scoring drives here on his own and help this team score, right? So I think this is a winnable game, but, I'm going to call it a loss, right? Just being safe here. They're returning a guy that they really struggled to stop last year. If they could stop him this year, obviously they win it, right? But that's definitely an if. Then they play Ponderosa. I think that's a loss. They return a solid defense per usual here. A really fast linebacker in Blake Branham, plus some other pieces between Carson Keach, Max Mervin. They do need to figure out the quarterback position, but I feel like they have enough around Pondo over there, where I kind of feel like they're a little bit more of a better overall team. So there you go. That's a loss. Mountain Vista, that's a loss. They are an explosive offense, probably potentially the best in the state. So there you go. They play Rock Canyon. Rock Canyon will be losing a solid amount, but they are a bigger squad here. Guys like Chaz Barnett, Rathburn over there. That's going to be tough to stop if you are, Chaparral. Plus, even though they lose, guys, they run a very simple offense where they really should just be plugging and playing dudes, honestly. So that's going to be tough to stop, right? And this is already a defense that kind of struggles or struggled last year to stop the run. Then they play Thunder Ridge. I think this could be a winnable game as they do lose a lot, but Thunder Ridge has always been really big, and they'll be tough to stop here, especially if they run the ball. I know they have a back in Luciana Tafoya. I don't know. I don't know if that's a game that they will win necessarily, but I would say out of the first couple ones, this is definitely more of a winnable game. It's kind of in the middle of the season, so we'll see what happens here. If Tevin Stokes has a good game, I think they win it, honestly, but that's definitely an if. As Thunder Ridge, I mean, you can almost always rely on them to have bigger dudes up front and a solid defense year by year, no matter who they lose. So there's that. Then they play Legend. That's a loss. Douglas County. This might be controversial, but I think that's a loss. Braden Monroe had a kick return, punt return, and receiving touchdown against Douglas County. Without him, I think Douglas County wins that game, though. And they returned their big three of Stonebreaker, Lish, well, I guess it's just their big two. They returned Stonebreaker and Lish, but they also got other guys like Charlie Reed up there, some solid linemen. So I'm kind of, I don't know. This could be like the Thunder Ridge game where they can win it, or maybe more. Yeah, the Thunder Ridge game where they can win it. But Davis Lish, I think, is a solid quarterback. Stonebreaker is going to be tough to stop as well here. I think that's a loss. Regis Jesuit, that's a loss. Fountain Fort Carson, that's a loss. Pine Creek, that's a loss. So, kind of tough here, but I have them going 0-10 here with a window of wins between 0 and 3. I'd love to be proved wrong here, but they just have a tough schedule. I mean, they're playing a lot of teams that really like to run the ball and are pretty big up front here, and that's kind of something they struggled with last year, and they're losing 10 tacklers, 10 of their 14 top tacklers from last year. I mean, they weren't great, so we'll just have to see. But would you rather have that or an experience? I don't know, but we'll just have to see. Now, I think the Rocky Mountain, Thunder Ridge, and Douglas County games are all games they could definitely win. But I'm just not sure about their defense. Like I said, that's what I'm most concerned about, their defense more so their offense. I kind of figure their offense is going to get it figured out, right? You have a quarterback who should be better. Will be one of the better quarterbacks in Colorado, period. But even if he plays good, that doesn't mean you're going to win games. You could score points and still lose, right? And so you need other players to step up other than the ones I just talked about there. I mean, you have to. Defensively, you got to be better. Offensively, I mean, really the only way you win games is just by winning a bunch of shootouts, which is that the best, recipe to success? Probably not, especially when you're not super big up front either. So, that's definitely kind of a tough thing to ask out of this squad. We'll just have to see what happens moving forward here. Like I said, I'd love to be wrong. I really like Tevin Stokes as a quarterback. I also really like Seth Olson as a left tackle here. But other than that, I mean, they just have a lot of holes. They have 20 other positions to fill out when it comes to starters here, at least just talking offense, defense, not even including special teams, which will be a whole nother thing as well. And it makes me nervous for sure, but we'll just have to see what happens moving forward for Chaparral. Like I said, would love to be proven wrong. All right, up next, let's talk about Denver East, the Angels here. They won 5-5, which was one game better than I predicted. I had them going 4-5, but, gave them a window of wins anywhere between 2 and 5. So, in the ballpark, which I will definitely take here, just being one game off. So, to start out here, they would lose to Fort Collins 21-20. I did say that one would be a close game. I did predict that one to be a dub, though, but unfortunately, they lost that one. So there you go there. That's a tough winnable game that you probably want. If you play that game later in the season, I think they probably win, though. So there you go. Following that, they play Smoky Hill, who forfeited. So, whatever. There is that. Or at least it says on here they forfeited. They might have actually played this game. I don't know why. Okay. Yeah, no, they definitely played this game. Max Preps is just being kind of weird here. I'm not going to lie. I don't know why they kept this. So they won the game, though, regardless. Then they played Denver South, who they weren't going to beat. They lost to kind of by a lot here, 55-0. Also, by the way, that Smoky Hill game was not originally scheduled here, so there you go. Following that, they play Rock Canyon, lost to them 37-15 as expected. Lost to Pine Creek 66-14. As expected still. Beat North Glen, which I predicted right there, 41-0. Then they played Doherty. That was a game I predicted being a loss here, as they did, return an experienced core on offense. And they lost barely, 28-16 there. So that's obviously tough. Following that, though, they beat Overland 27-10, Westminster 67-21, and Mountain Range 26-6. I think the Westminster game was the one that I thought they might lose there, but that was definitely not a loss, as they put up, I'm pretty sure, season high 67 points. So, good for them, but altogether finishing one game better than I predicted there. But with that being said, let's talk about graduating seniors, starting with Ben Wigglesworth here, the senior quarterback. Threw for 953 yards, 2 touchdowns to 15 interceptions. Now that I am looking at the stats here, I don't know if these are complete as far as touchdowns go. So I'm just going to throw that out there right now, because it also says between the two quarterbacks that played, they only threw 2 touchdowns, but then you look at the receivers and they have 13. So I'm just going to throw that out there. But regardless, this is a quarterback that they will be losing. I thought he was a guy that could go in here and kind of be a quick plug-and-play guy for this season, and he was for a little bit. They also lose Uziel, excuse me if I'm saying that wrong, Martinez. He was their 4th leading rusher. He had 297 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns on 25 carries there, but he was their leading receiver with 20 receptions, 355 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Like I said, not completely sure how accurate this is, but just putting that out there. They also lose Deveron Toppin Jr. As expected, he had a big year, catching 12 receptions for 264 yards and 5 touchdowns. He was also the top tackler with 53 tackles, 3 interceptions, and 8 pass deflections there. And then I believe they also lose center/guard Dylan Ingerson. They also lose Michael Baker, who was a 6'4", 280-pound tackle, and Antoine Shaney. He was a 6'4", 305-pound tackle as well. Before I forget, I believe they also had another guard who started as a sophomore but has transferred to Bear Creek, so that's another loss. So losing pretty solid amount of linemen here. So there you go there. Also, I think I misspoke. I said Deveron Toppin Jr. was a lead tackler. He was not the lead tackler, but he was at least like a top, 10 tackler. So there you go. Altogether, though, speaking of tacklers, only losing 3 of their top 13 tacklers, which includes Toppin here. In addition, that's Sweetie as well, number 45, Smith, number 20. And that's pretty much it. They returned their defense. So looking pretty good here. But, let's go ahead and talk about the offense here, starting with Elijah West Dua here, the incoming junior. He played as a sophomore last year and led at running back, rushing for 705 yards and 6 touchdowns. Should definitely be leaned on a little bit more heavily going into this next year. We'll see, the size up front, how that works out and whatnot. I think they'll still have some big bodies up front, but, you are losing some experience, so we'll see what happens there. They also returned Declan McDonald here. He played as a freshman, 6'6", 180 pounds, and, he looked really good. Just looking at his film, I'm pretty sure his stats are incomplete here, but it looked like he took over at some point, and I think he's due for a breakout season. I mean, he throws the ball really well, effortlessly. He's a tough quarterback to have out there, and I think he's one of the top class of 2026 quarterbacks, as he did definitely make our watch list, and so definitely somebody to keep an eye on, as he should have a big season here. They also returned DJ Crow, played as a sophomore, but, He is an incoming junior here, and the 6'3", 220-pound edge rusher had a breakout year as a sophomore. He was the second leading tackler with 93 tackles, 26 tackles for loss, and a team high 14.5 sacks and 15 hurries, emerging as one of the best edge rushers in Colorado. Should be a huge part of this defense that will be returning the majority of their squad. DJ Crow is an absolute stud out there and will be a nightmare for a lot of teams. They also bring back Elijah Goss here. He will be a senior this year, but the 6 foot, 250 plus pound defensive tackle / guard had 51 tackles and 14 tackles for loss, along with a solid 7.5 sacks. He's shown to be a real technician in the trenches, just watching him operate there. And he's a tough dude to go and block here. Him and Crow will terrorize a lot of offenses there up front. But staying in the front seven here, they also return Landon Holloway, the 5'10", 215-pound incoming senior middle linebacker, was the lead tackler last year with 98 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, and he's a hard hitter who should be due for a special season here and help lead a very talented and experienced squad here. He's tough. He's definitely the type of guy you probably don't want to go one-on-one with when tackling because he's going to pop you for sure. And then last but not least, they also bring back Dion Giles Ray here. The incoming junior safety was extremely productive here as a sophomore, gathering up 84 tackles and a team-high 5 interceptions. Really looked at his film and loved what I saw there. I think he's a big-time safety and will have a big year this year and next year. And, he should help kind of, hold down the back end of this defense here. So this is a really good defense moving forward. They also have a quarterback and a running back on offense. So, this will be a really fun Denver East team to watch as they head into this 2023 season. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about their schedule here. They start out by playing Smoky Hill. I think that's a dub there. They're losing some big guys, including Tyleek Bowers, plus a really good lineman as well. So even then, I didn't think they had the firepower to defeat Denver East. This defense will be really good. Plus, I expect Declan McDonald and Elijah Westdua to turn up against them. So that should be a good dub there. Following that, they play Denver South. This is a game that I actually might go to here. Like I said, on my birthday, Saturday, September 2nd, this would be a fun one to go to. And honestly, the more I look at Denver South and the more I think about Denver East and the steps moving forward, I think Denver East wins this game. It'll probably be a closer game, but I absolutely believe this is a winnable game for Denver East. Still will be tough, but if Declan McDonald takes steps forward and this defense plays well, which I definitely can see it here, I think they could stop a Denver South team that will honestly have no choice but to rely on the running game with the likes of Joseph Capra and Rashad Caldwell leaving. So I think that's another dub for Denver East right there. Following that, they play Rock Canyon. Without DeAndre Horn and Aiden Duda, I do kind of worry about this Rock Canyon squad on offense. I think like the South game, this could be another close one for sure. But I just think East could win this game if they play a clean game here. If they play a clean game, they win it. If they even have one turnover, then Rock Canyon's going to, try to salt away the rest of the clock once they get the lead. So for now, I'm going to give this one to Rock Canyon here. But I definitely think this is a game they could win, though. Especially at home. I definitely think that is a game they could definitely win. So we'll just have to see about that. Following that, though, they play Pine Creek in the Springs. I think that's a loss. I also think Pine Creek is like a contender this year. Definitely a top 5, if not top 3 team in the state. So that's a loss. That's a tough one there. But should probably be a little bit more competitive. Following that, they play North Glen. That should be a win this year. They beat them last year, so it definitely should be one this year. Same with Doherty. I think this year they beat them with everyone they're losing. This should be a much more interesting game, and definitely one I think that they should be able to win. This is another one I look to potentially go to. We'll see. Then they play Overland here. This won't be an easy matchup, but with the defense they return, I think that kind of gives them the edge here. So I think that's a win, but could easily be a loss, though. Could easily be a loss. So we'll just have to see what happens there. But will be a good one, though. Following that, they play Westminster. I think that's a win. They do return a solid dual threat quarterback and some other guys. But I think this defense should be able to take care of them, and then they should take care of Mountain Range at the end of the season. So altogether, I have Denver East going 7-2 here, bouncing back, and then also having a window of wins between 5 and 8 here. I think the Denver South, Rock Canyon, and Pine Creek games are the ones that they will lose, potentially lose, if any here. South and Rock Canyon are definitely games, though, that I see them winning. So I am just going to throw that out there. There's definitely a world where they win it, and I don't think that's too far off there. Pine Creek, not so much, though, so there you go. But looking at other games here, the Doherty game should be an interesting one. Still favor them, as well as the Overland game. But altogether, I mean, this squad has so many big-time defensive players. This defense is tough to beat. You know, they're going to pressure you. You have Holloway back there who's gonna, lay down the hammer. You have Giles Ray, who's a really good cover safety over there. I like this defense. Plus, you add on a promising young backfield between their running back and their quarterback. I think this is a team that could, really turn up and make the playoffs this year. I think this is definitely a playoff team here. Now, honestly, I'm looking at their league, and I don't believe they lose a game. That Overland game might get dicey, I'm not going to lie. Maybe even the Doherty game if they figure out a quarterback. But I'd say I'm definitely a little bit more concerned about that Overland game. But if they could start out with a good win over Smoky Hill and Denver South, that should help them out a little bit here more as well. And if they could tag on a win against Rock Canyon, which I think they can, that would also be huge for Denver East. We will just have to see moving forward, but this will be one of the most exciting teams in Colorado this season. Okay, let's move on, though. Let's talk about far northeast here. Last year went 5-5. This time they finished one game short of my predicted record here. Man, I feel like I'm really close with some of these predictions with these teams. But, just one game short, still fell within the window of wins, which I gave them at 5 to 7 wins here. And so they were definitely in the ballpark with that. One of the teams on this episode that I was in the ballpark with that. So there you go there. Let's talk about the season. Beat Westminster 56-7. Lost to Vista Ridge, a relatively close one here, which I thought would be 43-28. Then Gateway forfeited to them. Played Longmont. Lost to this one 26-13 here, which I thought would be a win. Honestly, I'm not going to lie. But they lose this one. Still, a 2-score game. It could have been winnable there. Played Pueblo West, lost to them 28-14, another 2-score game there. Went on, played G-Dub here, beat them 48-13. I didn't think they would be able to, but they did. So that's another game that I thought, they would definitely be able to, a game they would lose there, but they won that one. Played Thomas Jefferson, beat them 38-0. Played Ponderosa, lost to them 55-27. And then lost to Denver South in a really close game, 17-0 there, before ending the season versus Vista Peak, where they beat them barely, though, 21-20 here. So there you go there. Now that I'm looking at the schedule, I am pretty sure they must have taken off. Yeah, they did. They took off Pueblo Central from their schedule. So if they played him, I think they would have, they would have won that one, and they would have went 6-5, right? So there you go. But it is what it is. Let's talk about some graduating seniors as they do lose. A pretty solid amount here. Let's go ahead and start with Antavius Hughes. He ended up being their leading rusher with 1,083 yards and 5 touchdowns. I expected him to get a little bit more involved in this offense here, and he did, taking on a bigger role here. Also losing Dramani Jackson, who was one of my favorite two-way athletes from this last season. He rushed for 728 yards, 8 touchdowns, while catching 23 receptions for 310 yards and an additional 3 touchdowns. Also on defense, had 55 tackles, 4 pass deflections at corner. He really did a lot for this team, and so he will be missed for the squad. They will also be missing Emmett Anderson. He was one of the lead tacklers with 77. Also had 14 tackles for loss and 7 hurries. Was one of the leaders for the squad, so will definitely be missed there. And then this was something I kind of saw here a little last second here, but Jeremiah Amon Jr. was their starting quarterback, and he did pretty all right, throwing for 13 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, while throwing for 912 yards here and rushing for a touchdown. But it appears he has transferred to Cherry Creek, or at least last I saw, he was on the Cherry Creek roster. So he's now over there. Man, that's a tough loss. Honestly, that's a real tough loss for far northeast. A little surprising as well, but it is what it is. And then altogether on defense, they are losing 6 of their top 13 tacklers, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they're losing 5 of their top 6 tacklers. So that's Anderson, Kumake, McAllister, Dramani Jackson, Aaron Banks here. So that's a lot of guys to be losing. Also, by the way, Aaron Banks, one of their better corners as well. So another guy in their secondary that they're losing. He actually led the team with 4 interceptions. So, not the worst, but you got to replace some leadership for sure here. And so, talking about leadership, let's talk about some key players here, starting with Russell Patton. The incoming senior is a 6'2", 210-pound running back / linebacker. Ran for 207 yards and 4 touchdowns here. Definitely a guy who will potentially be looking to get more carries as they are losing their top 3 rushers. So look for him to definitely contribute to that. He was also the lead tackler with 80 tackles and 4 sacks. Should be the lead guy and one of their best athletes going into next year. And he's also a watch list linebacker, by the way. They also bring back Jeremiah Jaramillo, the 6'4", 346-pound. Incoming junior tackle, was a monster last year. For his size, he moved relatively well, and he is a tough run blocker. Not a bad pass blocker at all either, though, but there are times he picks the wrong man when pass blocking, so there you go. But regardless, he's a big-time lineman that's returning. That should really help out this rushing game. Speaking of linemen, though, they also bring back Jesse J.J. Matthews. The incoming junior is a 6', 270-pound center that started last year, and he was a tough center, and I love his game. This could be a breakout year for him, high key here. I really think he's a next-level guy, too. I mean, just watching him play, he's a tough-nosed run blocker and a really good pass blocker. Just a nasty player altogether to have up front. So having those two guys between Jaramillo, and Matthews, also, hopefully I'm saying that right, but that'll be huge for this line moving forward here. They also bring back Kylan Jones. He's an incoming junior. He's another player who could potentially turn up for them on offense here. Had some solid film at running back. So there you go there. This far northeast team got some good size up front on offense. They should be able to run the ball relatively well and, pass the ball. But we'll just have to see who's at quarterback. Also, on top of that, they are losing some receivers here. They're losing their top 2 in Banks and Jackson. So we'll just have to see who steps up at receiver and gives them another dimension. And then on defense, they are losing a solid amount, but bringing back Russell Patton to help lead this defense is definitely not a bad thing, considering he was their lead tackler last year. So we'll just have to see how that goes for far northeast. They definitely shouldn't be the worst team or worst defense in Colorado. So with that being said, let's talk about their schedule here. To start, they play Westminster here. This should be a closer game, but this line dominated this game here last year, clearing the way for a total of 464 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns between all of their backs. One of those backs was Kylan Jones, by the way, who's returning, who went for 122 yards and a touchdown in this game. I think he'll come back and really turn up against this Westminster squad. They're not the biggest up front, so I'm looking at Matthews and Jeremiah Jaramillo here to really turn up and clear the way. Then they play Vista Ridge. This could be a closer game, I think. I mean, it was a close game last year. I think it's a winnable game, but I also think this is a loss. We don't know who Vista Ridge's quarterback is going to be. But we also definitely don't know who Far Northeast's quarterback is going to be, because at least Vista Ridge has 2 really good options. Far Northeast, they don't exactly have an experienced guy back there, because that was supposed to be Amon Jr. Playing. So that puts them in a tough spot. If he was there, I probably would have given them this dub. But for now, I think this is a loss. Then they play Gateway. That should be a good confidence win there. Following that, they play Longmont. I think that's a loss. Longmont will be tough this year. I think they're a playoff team. A higher tier playoff team this year. Following that, they play Pueblo West. This is still probably a loss for them, but Pueblo West does lose guys like Jacob Trader and whatnot. We'll see. We'll definitely see here. If they could control the pace of the game, maybe they win. But I think they need a little bit more than a rushing game to win those. But we'll just see. Following that, they play G-Dub, George Washington. I think this is a dub. I was wrong about them last year. I think this year, their line should really dominate this game. Following that, they play Thomas Jefferson. I think this will be a close game. Both teams like to run the ball, or should run the ball here. Could go either way, but I think I'm going to go with Far Northeast here for now. I like their line a little bit better. Following that, they play Ponderosa. That's a loss. Denver South, that will be another closer game, but this far, into the season, I mean, this is played on October 21st. I kind of trust Denver South and their quarterback situation to be relatively figured out, so I think that's a loss. Following that, they play Vista Pico. This could be a close one, and I think it's winnable, but we will have to see where both teams are at the end of the season here. It really could go either way, but I think that is a loss. Yeah, I think that's a loss. So I have Far Northeast going 4-6, 4 wins, 6 losses, but I also have their window out wins anywhere between 4 to 6 wins this next season. Now, they have a talented offensive line, honestly, and a couple nice athletes to work with, but I am concerned about their inexperience here. Losing their quarterback to Cherry Creek definitely hurts my confidence in them. I know they run the ball a lot, so, there's that, but having a returning quarterback always helps, especially considering the losses of Dramani Jackson and Banks here. Now, the losses on their defense is also concerning, but they're not losing that much. They return Russell Patton, which I feel really good about. We'll just have to see what happens. Definitely got to keep a close eye on this team here, as they do have a tough offensive line. So maybe they just figure it all out on offense and it's fine. And, they get over 500 or whatever and make the playoffs. We'll have to see, though. We'll definitely have to see. They're kind of in that weird 4A, 5A league. I think they make the playoffs as a 5A team. So there's that. It probably definitely hurts them losing to 4A teams, though. So it puts them in a tough position. But we'll just have to see what happens moving forward for Far Northeast. Like I said, really love their offensive line. Love Russell Patton as well. I think he's a great athlete. We'll just have to see who else could step up, though, moving forward for Far Northeast. Okay, let's talk about Hinkley here. Yeah, no, this is definitely going to be tough. So last year, before the season, I did predict them to win one game. I think I predicted them to win 2 games, and then I had a window of wins between 1 and 4, right? So at worst, they win 1 game. Instead, they went 0-10. They went 0-10 here, and what makes this worse is that they played some of the worst teams in Colorado and went 0-10. So this almost for sure, makes them the worst team by default in Colorado. So that is really tough here. This was one team that I was 1 game outside of my window of wins. So just at the ballpark, but still in the neighborhood for sure here. But also, I am going to say this. At this point, I thought they would have Wandale Davis Jr. At quarterback. Or actually, no, I didn't. He was going to he transferred to Overland, so they were losing their best player regardless. But if they did have him, they would have been good. And by the way, he has a bunch of D1 offers now. But they had a couple guys coming back, Tatum Starks, Frank Tafua, who I thought could win them at least one more game. And I mean, obviously, you can't just rely on two guys to win a playoff game, to win a football game, right? Especially against some good talent. And so they went 0-10 here, had no close games, really. I mean, the most they scored in any game was 8 points against Palmer, and they lost that one 40-8 here. And they only actually scored 4 times in the season. Yeah, man, 4 times. They got shut out like a whopping, I want to say 5 times, 5 out of the 10 times this season. They never scored over 7 points, except for one time against Palmer at the end. So that is crazy. That's just tough here. But I guess, let's talk about some graduating seniors here. I mean, here, they did have a new head coach, right? Which I don't know if that makes it better, right? I don't know if it makes it any better, but they did have a new head coach here, so there was that. But let's get to talking about graduating seniors here, starting with Tatum Starks. He was their best athlete, in my opinion, and I knew he would be. He ended up playing a little bit of quarterback as well, which is not the worst thing in the world. Did only pass for 231 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick, 47% completion rating there, but also rushed for 737 yards. No touchdowns, though, apparently, which I don't know if that's correct or not. I know they only scored 4, so there's that, but yeah, so that's definitely tough. They also graduate Isa Franco here. He had 36 tackles and 15 pass deflections at corner, which is pretty good. So that'll definitely be missed, as that was good production. Altogether, though, and by the way, Starks also had 82 tackles, 16 pass deflections. And it looks like he caused 7 fumbles, which is wild. But obviously couldn't make the most, or the team couldn't make the most out of all of that. So 2 pretty productive guys in their secondary that they are losing. And they're losing 4 of their top 13 tacklers. So, at the very least, you bring back a little bit of experience here. Not a lot, but still a little bit. And so let's talk about some of those guys here. There's Jeffrey Peach, I want to say, the 6'2", 225-pound defensive tackle. Had a productive year, going for 37 tackles, 7 sacks, which he was the leader of. He also had a team-high 28 hurries. Going into this next season should definitely be big for him, as he will be a senior. So there you go. There is also Isaiah Penson. Will be one of the many defenders returning. He had 43 tackles and 2 sacks here. He was actually the second leading tackler last year. So at the very least, this defense should be fine here. Offensively, though, there is a lot to worry about. And, I'm just not going to sugarcoat it here. They're going to lose a lot this next season. And honestly, I don't really see a win here. Let's go game by game. G-Dub, I think that's a loss. They're losing a lot, but they still return a solid amount of skill players and some other guys on defense. So I don't think that's a game they win, even though that might be closer. Aurora Central, that's a loss. They are losing some guys, but like I said, another team with a lot of talent there. Adams City, I think, is probably a loss. They were really young last year, so at the very least, I mean, they bring back a lot of talent. Also, this was a team they lost 53-0 to. Geez. Centaur should be a loss. Liberty's a loss. Thornton's a loss because they have a good quarterback over there. Whitefield is definitely a loss. Gateway, I would have never thought Gateway would have beat them this bad, 46-6. This Gateway team forfeited teams earlier on in the season here. But the quarterback now, Sorrell here, he threw for 2 touchdowns and ran for 5 touchdowns. Oh my God. And 182 yards. That is, yikes. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that's crazy. They're not beating Gateway, especially with him returning there. Play Vista Peak, they're not beating them. Palmer should be better, so they're not beating them. So honestly, I just don't see them winning a game here. They're returning nearly no production on offense. I think the defense will be an issue still. They're experienced, but they let up a lot last year, so we'll see. I'll give them a generous window of wins between 0 and 3. I just won't say they won't win a game. Maybe they win 3 games here. Maybe, I guess their best chances are George Washington. Yeah, George Washington. I would say Gateway if they could get it together there. And then maybe Thornton or Adams City, something like that. But just in general, I don't see them winning a game. So there you go. Would love to be proved wrong. Would love to see a little bit more improvement with Hinkley, but we'll just have to see what happens moving forward. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about Overland here. Last year, predicted them going 4-6 with a window of wins anywhere between 4 and 7. So a pretty big window of wins here. But, this year they went 500. They went 5-5, falling within the window of wins. So they were definitely in the ballpark where I was with my predictions. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about their schedule real quick. So they did not play Mountain Vista, right? But they still played Grandview to start the season where they lost 41-6, which, was expected, right? Following that, they beat Prairie View 35-21, which I predicted. Lost to Smoky Hill 42-12, which I also predicted. Same with Heritage here. Then they beat Grand Junction, Westminster, and North Glen here. Those were all wins that I predicted, I believe, or maybe not the North Glen one. Oh, maybe not the North Glen one, but I would have predicted them to be North Glen, so I guess that replaced the Mountain Vista game, but I believe that was a league game, though, so maybe they just took it off. And then Denver East lost to them 27-10. I thought that would be a close matchup. It was relatively close, right? Then they beat Mountain Range and then lost to Doherty 52-28 at the end of the season. So there you go there. Now let's talk about some graduating seniors. There's one big one here in Kamari Owens. He was somebody that really turned up, and we found here early last off season, I would say. In the off season, I mean, we watched his film, and he was a very good corner. He is now committed to UNC here, and he did make our top 5 corners list. He was also their second lead receiver with 22 receptions, 274 passing yards, and 4 passing touchdowns there. They also lose their leading receiver, though, in Curtis Bunton. He had 557 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns on 43 receptions. Also was a member of the secondary with 42 tackles and a pick. They lose Quincy Humphrey as well. The 6'3 linebacker had 44 tackles, a sack, and a pick. They also lose another corner here in Sir Joyner. The 5'10 corner had 29 tackles and 3 interceptions, which I think he was the INT leader, he was the co-INT leader here with what looks to be his brother, I believe. But altogether, they're losing 7 of their top 13 tacklers, with a lot of them being members of the secondary. So definitely a little bit of a concern there, having the back end not locked down as well. And then on offense here, it really looks like they're losing their top 2 receivers, and that is probably it. So with that being said, let's talk about key players going into this year, starting with their quarterback, Andre Veasley. As a sophomore, threw for 1,162 yards, 11 touchdowns to 5 picks. Of the last 2 games, he had some of his best games. Against Mountain Range, threw for 224 yards and 2 touchdowns. Against Doherty, threw for 221 yards and 3 touchdowns. If he could take a step forward, that'll help Overland improve a bit. I think he's a good quarterback, and he did make our watch list, so definitely a guy to look out for as well. Speaking of dudes to look out for, though, there's also Jarius Ward here. As a sophomore, just like Veasley, he rushed for 637 yards and 11 touchdowns as the lead guy here. He will be an incoming junior, and he's a tough back. Real tough to bring down, and should be due for another big season, a breakout season, potentially. So those 2 guys will be heading up the offense there. Now on defense, Prince Joyner, who I believe is the brother of Sir Joyner here. He had 58 tackles and 3 interceptions along with 5 pass deflections. He will be one of the highest tackle leaders returning here. Actually, I think he is the lead tackler, was the lead tackler last year, and also co-led in interceptions. So there you go there. He should kind of help hold down, a secondary that is losing a lot here. He is one of the few returning starters, but he will be back. In addition, back to the offensive side, I want to talk about one more player here, and that is Talio Seals Fisher. The incoming senior receiver had some ups and downs, but he caught 29 receptions for 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. His game against Grand Junction, where he caught 6 receptions for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he had another big game against Mountain Range where he had 6 receptions for 40 yards. Really showed his potential there. I think he should be due for a big season with the top 2 receivers in front of him leaving here, and hopefully Andre Veasley taking a step forward. So there you go. Overland looking pretty solid here. They got a solid backfield. They have some guys returning. We'll just have to see how well they put it together. But to start, they play Grandview. That's a loss. I don't think they win that one. Following that, they play Prairie View, though. Prairie View, they beat them last year 35-21. I still think this could be a close game, but I trust Veasley and Ward to figure it out here. So that's a win. Following that, they play Smoky Hill. I feel like this could go either way, but there is a size difference up front, so I'll give it to Smoky Hill for now. Then they play Heritage. Heritage will be a lot better this year than last year, so I think that'll be a loss. Following that, they play Grand Junction. This was a close game last year, but I think this year it may not be as close, and it will favor Overland, so that should be a win. Westminster, I think, will be a very underrated shootout here, but a fun one, that is. But it should still result in them winning. I think this will be a similar game, especially considering Andre Veasley will able to play in this game, because I don't know if he did. I don't think he did last year, but it could go either way. They have a good quarterback of their own over there. Then they play Denver East. I think that's a loss. Should be a closer game, but the sophomore back who tore apart this defense is returning. Plus, Denver East's defense is pretty good as well. And then they play Mountain Range and Doherty at the end. I think those are both wins there. Doherty might be a little bit closer. This might actually decide who goes to the playoffs right here. But I think they win that game, though. Doherty is a bit bigger up front, but they are losing some key pieces here, especially at quarterback. So I think this goes Overland's way, and so they don't have the toughest schedule here. And I actually think Denver East will probably win this league, so maybe they don't make playoffs, but I think they will go 6-4 with a window of wins anywhere between 4 and 6 here. If they could play one of these teams, Heritage or Grandview, closer, that could go a long way. If they could beat a Smoky Hill, that would go a long way as well to get them to 7. But we'll just have to see. Honestly, I like their young core that they have with Veasley and Ward. They should be able to win a couple more games, but I am worried about the losses they have on defense, especially in the secondary. In addition to the receiving core, I mean, Talil Seals Fisher is kind of their main receiver coming back. I want to see if any other guys could step up. Plus, as well, I mean, the linemen up front, they are a little bit smaller here. So I don't know how well that's going to hold up. But I still think they should be around the 500 range. Whether they're below or above depends on who steps up, other than the guys I just mentioned for Overland. So we'll just have to see what happens there. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about Prairie View here. Predicted them to go 5-5 with the window of wins anywhere between 4 and 6, but man, they finished 2-8, so that's definitely below the window of wins I had for them, and below expectations, honestly, here. I mean, let's go ahead and talk about how it all went wrong. To start, they played Silver Creek. I thought that was a game they could win. They lost to them 38-18. That is definitely tough there. Lost to Overland and Pooter as well, 35-21, then 20-6 respectively, before beating Westminster and North Glen 63-39, and then inched out a win against North Glen 21-14. Then they lost, or sorry, by the way, the Pooter game was one that I thought that would be a close win for them, but instead they lost, so there you go there. But moving on though, lost to Brighton 34-14, Legacy 47, Rangeview 29-15 here. I thought that Rangeview game might be a game they could win, because last year's game was close. And I thought the offense could get something together, but they just couldn't quite put something together as they lost by 14, kind of in a close one. Then they played Mullen, lost to them 38-23, in Horizon 51-23 here. So there you go. Definitely finishing below expectations, but they were a young squad. Let's talk about some of the seniors they are losing, though, as they are losing a couple here, it looks like. So I am going to say this. I don't know why, but their stats on defense are definitely incomplete. On offense, it looks like to be more complete, though. But on defense, their stats are definitely incomplete. So with these incomplete stats, with only 5-ish games listed for some of them, they're losing 2 of their top 13 tacklers in Delgado here, it looks like, and Sanchez, Risto Delgado, and then Juan Pablo Sanchez. So there you go, losing those 2 guys. We'll just have to see what happens. They're also losing a receiver here in Elijah Abeda, I want to say. He's transferring to Riverdale Ridge, it looks like, so he will be gone as well. And that's kind of a big deal because he was actually their second receiver, it looks like here. 9 receptions, 250 yards, but incomplete stats. So not too much I could go off of here, but this is just what I have. Now, when talking about key players, I think these 2 are going to be the most important. And Kunio Ishima, he threw for 791 yards, 4 touchdowns to 2 picks, while rushing for 284 yards here. He's one of the few with complete stats here. Also threw with a 39% completion percentage. It could be better. I expect him to be better going into his senior year. If you could play a little bit more efficient, then I think they win some of these closer games. So we'll just have to see about that. They also returned Colton Lance. He had a big-time junior year, rushing for 1,010 yards here. Touchdowns was not recorded, unfortunately, but he was one of the big-time players for this squad, and so he should continue to bring stability to this team, probably going for another 1,000 yards as well. So there you go there. Like I said, not a lot of stats to go off of or a lot of film, but there you go. We'll just have to work with what you have. And you also got to remember they are losing their second leading receiver, so there is something there to that, but they do return everyone else, it looks like. But to start, they play Silver Creek. I don't think that's a win, that's a loss. Eli Mears and Cole Rogers from last year, they went crazy against Prairie View, so the defense definitely needs to be better to give them an overall better chance of winning. Then they play Overland. Last segment, I said they are returning some key pieces, plus their quarterback and running back who had solid games against them. That's a loss. Following that, they play North Glen. This was a close game last year, but I feel like they're losing enough players where I feel like this is definitely a game where I could give Prairie View the edge. So there you go. That's a win there. Brighton, Legacy, both losses. Honestly, Brighton should be better. Legacy, they're going to be a playoff team. Rangeview, I think, could be a winnable game, but I worry they won't have enough size to combat the linemen they have up front, and they are a pretty big squad, so I think that might be a loss. And then Mullen should probably be a loss, and Horizon isn't scheduled yet, but that's probably a loss as well. And so their schedule isn't complete, but it is July 18th when I'm recording this, so it's a little later in the season. So this is the best I could do for now, though. I think they're going to go 1-6 with this schedule, and I'm giving them a window of wins between 1 and 4 here. Their winnable games being Brighton, Rangeview, and North Glen here. But I only really have them favored against North Glen. So we'll just have to see. They do play kind of a tough schedule, so a lot of their wins will probably come non-league, I would think, at least here, and probably not in league. So we'll just have to see what happens moving forward for Prairie View. It could be worse. They have a quarterback, they have a running back, but they are playing some solid comps, so that's kind of where my worries come from. And, I mean, you need your defense to step up. They haven't been great. So, hopefully they could take a step forward as they are a little bit more experienced here, at least compared to last year. All right, moving on though, let's talk about Rangeview here. This was one of the teams I was wrong about. I had them going 1-9 with a window of wins between 1 and 3. They finished 5-5, just above their window of wins here. So to start, they did not play Heritage at the start of the season. I do think that's a loss they avoided though there. So there you go. They would start out though by beating Vista Peak 17-7 in a close one. I thought it would be close, but I also thought it would go the other way. So that's a good win for them to get right off the bat there. Following that, they beat Westminster 34-18. They lost to Douglas County, which I thought they would, 35-12. Then they beat Aurora Central 14-7. I originally predicted that as a loss there, but I also thought Aurora Central would be so much more better, and they just really underperformed. So there you go. Now to replace the Heritage game, it looks like they picked up the Northridge game here. A 3A squad, right? A playoff team in 3A, and they just got blasted 56-0. That's a little bit of an embarrassing game. I don't know how you allow that to happen, but that's definitely tough to have. So there you go there. Then they play Legacy and Horizon. I mean, I didn't think they'd win either game here. Lost 35-14 to Legacy, and then they barely lost to Horizon 20-17. That's probably a win you could get back, but that's all right there. Then they play Prairie View, who they beat 29-15, and then oh, and by the way, that Prairie View game was one I was wrong about. I thought Prairie View would be a lot better. They definitely weren't here, and Rangeview took advantage of that. And then against Brighton, though, I thought that would be a loss. It was a close win, 39-35 here. That's definitely one you could feel happy about, especially considering you lost a close one just a bit ago. So you would definitely take that. And then they played Mullen, who's, stacked. So lost to them 35-14. So altogether, barely missed out on the playoffs. I don't know if they make it if they beat Horizon, but maybe they do. Maybe they do. The Northridge loss was probably the thing that really killed them, though. I'm not going to lie. That definitely kind of killed their chances at playoffs. You can't be losing to a 3A team like that. And, they did. So that's that. But let's talk about some graduating seniors, because there were some really good players, starting with Armani Patterson here. He was their best player, who ran for 1,067 yards and 11 touchdowns here. As expected, he was kind of the focal point of this offense, so that's definitely big time as well. Also, I am going to make a little side note here. They do lose their quarterback, Abunu Asfa, I want to say, who, wasn't really relied on too much in 10 games, threw for 332 yards, 4 touchdowns to 2 picks. Also had 349 rushing yards and a touchdown. So there you go. They're losing him. They also lose their third leading rusher in Collins Boston here, DJ Collins Boston, who had 317 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. And okay, they're losing a lot of rushers here, as well as Greg Brooks, who had 212 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then another Collins here, who, didn't play a lot. He had DJ Collins at 177 yards. That might have just been a glitch, though, with the stats. So that's probably still him. So losing a solid amount there, though, at running back. And they did run the ball a pretty solid amount. So that's never, a good thing to be doing that. They also lose Kevin Frazier, a 6'4" linebacker, who is also their lead tackler. Their stats do look a little incomplete here, but he had 31 tackles, and so that's their lead tackler, at least according to Max Preps. They're also losing Nasir Simmons. He was one of the few bright spots on this team. He had 23 tackles here, and it looks like he had 3 sacks, but no interceptions, so there you go. Altogether, though, according to Max Preps, which, like I said, stats might be incomplete here, they are still losing 10 of their top 13 tacklers. So a good part of the defense. You're also losing, obviously, all your top 4 or 5 rushers on offense, including your lead one in Patterson and your quarterback. So it's going to be an interesting year for Rangeview, to say the least. But, let's start by talking about some key players going into this season, starting with Jaheim, a.k.a. Ja Alexander, the 6'2", 205-pound athlete here. At receiver, there were only 5 games listed. I don't know if that's completely accurate here. But, in those 5 games, he had a solid year, catching 6 receptions for 142 yards and 4 touchdowns, doing his thing there. He also had 41 rushing yards, and it looked like he got some passing in here as well at quarterback. 5-5, 485 yards here. Did throw 2 picks, though. So, yeah, there's that as well. But, going into this year, I think he's a great athlete. I watched through his film. He has speed. He has good size, It's just going to be interesting to see how he's used. Because, obviously, if you're a receiver, you can't throw the ball to yourself. So, there's not much you could really do out there. I kind of see him going into that quarterback spot here and playing quarterback for Rangeview, running the ball probably a lot, throwing when he can, but I think he is one of their best athletes. So wouldn't be surprised if they go ahead and center the offense around their explosive athlete, who, by the way, has a really good frame. And so he could have a breakout season. This is definitely a breakout candidate right here, but we will definitely have to see. They're losing a lot here. I just think he is one of their best athletes, though. So you got to kind of work with your best athlete and do what you can to tailor the offense around him for the best of the team. So we'll see about that, but definitely somebody to look out for. They also bring back Taylor Thomas. He's an incoming junior, listed at 6'1", 265. He's a very underrated lineman who moves well, is good in pass pro, run blocking situations. Watch him pull on run plays if you ever get the chance and slide in the pocket on pass plays. It's pretty impressive, and so I think he will be a key part of this line here. That's a big thing, to be getting a good lineman like him back who's very efficient in those ways. They also bring back Brandon Jones, the 6'1", 250 guard here. He's a junior. He brings a bit more experience to the line, as well as Thomas, as they both played as sophomores. Look for him to be a big-time contributor as well. In addition to Jabon Beasley, the incoming senior, he's 6'3", 290 pounds here. I believe he was on the line as well at tackle. That would probably make the most sense. He's another bigger player for them. Should definitely add size and help with the run game and pass blocking as well. Now, as far as the defense goes, they're losing a lot, so there's going to be opportunities to start. And there were these 2 players that really kind of stood out to me. DeVros Cigar Jr. here, Cigars Jr., and then Jay Sean Tolliver Qualls. They will be incoming sophomores, right, at corners. They look solid, in their freshman film, which was a mix of JV, freshman games, right? But they could definitely see some more playing time, especially with all they're losing on defense. So keep an eye on them to possibly, take a step forward and be really good for Rangeview, who does have a history of having pretty solid, DBs back there. So we'll just have to see what happens there. But altogether, you have 3 of your 5 offensive linemen coming back. You have a really good athlete in Jaw Alexander coming back as well, who I think you could use in multiple ways. And then you have some young players that might come through. So Rangeview, I think it'll probably still be a little bit of a rebuilding season, but they have something to work with here, and so it really could go either way. Regardless, let's go ahead and talk about their schedule. To start, they play Vista Peak. I think this could potentially be another win, but with the number of contributors that Rangeview is losing on defense, as well as, on offense, it's definitely concerning. So we'll just have to see what happens there. Now, luckily, they do bring back their line, so that should kind of help along those newer players who are put in bigger roles and whatnot. But Vista Peak returns a lot of players, right? They don't need to learn. They already have that continuity. And so I think I'm going to give the edge to Vista Peak. Could definitely be a winnable game, though. Following that, they play Westminster. This was a close game last year. I think this year it will be even closer, but they do return their quarterback who found a lot of success and got really hot as the season went on. So I worry about Rangeview's defense here, being able to stop him. If anything, I kind of trust the offense to keep them in this game, but I think this is another loss, unfortunately. Then they play Douglas County. I think this is a loss. Stonebreaker, Lish, Reed. They're going to be really tough to stop there. Following that, they play Aurora Central. I think that's definitely a win there. Both teams are losing a lot, but I think Rangeview is the bigger one, or at least they have more size up front with experience too. And I trust that. I honestly trust that. I think by this point, they should be able to start figuring some things out on offense. Following that, they play Northridge here. And while this was a really bad blowout last year, this should be a win this year. Look, Rangeview is not losing as much as Northridge. Northridge is losing a lot. They're one of the teams that were really senior heavy, so I think Rangeview could definitely beat them here. Then they play Legacy, Horizon. I think those are both losses. I think both of those teams are big-time playoff teams with really tough offenses to start with really good quarterbacks. Yeah, I don't know about that matchup against this Rangeview defense. They will be tested in those two games. Following that, they play Prairie View. I think that's a win. It could go either way, though, but by this point in the season, I think the team would have gelled enough where they could defeat Prairie View, and it would be because of their offense. I also think they're just bigger than them up front, so they should just kind of be able to bulldoze their way through here. So there you go. Following that, they play Bryden. Bryden had a tough season last year, but I think this year it will begin to change a little bit for them. Will still be a tough game, even a winnable game. But I don't think Rangeview has a running back who could rush for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns again, like Armani Patterson. That's a lot to ask out of an offense, right? Nonetheless, one guy. So, we'll just have to see what happens. They do return the line that allowed him to do that, so that's kind of why I feel optimistic about them potentially winning. For now, I'm going to give the edge to Bryden, though. I just need to see what Rangeview does at this point. Then they play Mullen at the end here. They're stacked. That's a loss. And so my predicted record for Rangeview is 3-7, but I'm going to give them a window of wins between 2 and 5 with a chance to get back to 500 here. And I could definitely see them getting to 500, but it just worries me how many players they're losing on defense. I can see some young varsity players step up for the squad, but even then, how much could you really expect out of those players going into this season here? I also worry just a little bit about the production on offense. I know they have a line. I know they have Alexander back there, but who else do they have? Right? You're going to need a little bit more. You're going to need receivers. It would help to have another running back who could turn up as well to really have a stable enough offense where I feel like they can win some of these closer games here. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, I think John Alexander is one of the best athletes in the state. I would like to see how Rangeview uses him. That could be the tricky thing going into all of this because they do have pieces on offense here. It's really just going to be a matter of, finding a way to go ahead and get it done. Also, by the way, they had a new head coach last year in Christopher Dixon. I believe he should be returning. He's not listed on here, so maybe that is another story to look out for potentially as well. But, we'll just have to see what happens moving forward. All right, let's talk about Legend here. I was wrong about them. I don't think they were the team I was the most wrong about. I did have them going 0-10, though, with a window of wins between 0 and 4 here. But they went 6-4, exceeding expectations. So I was wrong about, I will admit that. But let's go ahead and talk about how their season went. To start, they played Vista Ridge. I thought this was definitely a losable game. I think this was one that Vista Ridge really just kind of handed to Legend here. Too many turnovers. For having a 4-star quarterback and all the guys you have, too many turnovers. That's probably one of the most embarrassing losses in Vista Ridge history, to be completely honest with you. So there you go there. And with a team like Legend, they're going to take that. They're not just going to, allow them to win. So there you go there. That's a tough one, but it is what it is. Now, they did defeat, though, Pomona and Castleview, which I was admittedly wrong about. Castleview, I thought they would be better. They were horrible. They weren't horrible, but they were well under expectations this year, so that was disappointing. And then Pomona, I knew they were losing a lot. But, I thought they would still be able to win that one. Because you got to remember, Legend was not returning any. They were returning like 1 or 2 players. And one of them was a lineman. So I didn't know what to expect out of this team here. And so I kind of just predicted, teams with more seniors to be winning. And they won those 2 games, so credit to them. Pomona 42-0, Castleview 49-21. Now, what I did get right is them losing to Ponderosa 21-14 here. They also lost to Legacy 38-24, which I thought would be a loss, but would bounce back, and they would go ahead and beat Chaparral. which I think I'm pretty sure I had that one. Oh, dang. I had that one as a loss, which now that I think back was a bad prediction there. They definitely should have beat them without their quarterback over there. And then they would beat Fountain Fort Carson, which was a big one here, 43-24. Before losing to Pine Creek, 31-14. Regis 26-11 as expected. Would beat Douglas County, 43-28. That one looks a little bit closer than it was, but I feel like they were in control of that game for the most part there. And then in the playoffs, they would go ahead and beat Pooter 22-15. That was a really close game there. But, you know, a win is a win. And then they would lose to Valor Christian 42-14. So, not a bad year. Still made the playoffs. You know, I think this was definitely a year where they needed to figure out some things. They had some obvious growing pains. And, you know, they worked through it, right? But they are graduating some seniors here. Let's start with their quarterback, John Brookhart. He got the majority of the snaps this season. He did struggle with injuries kind of near the end of the season, which affected his availability at times and how well he could play. I don't think he was really healthy for that Valor game, but I mean, he's a senior, so he's going to play it anyways. But in his first year, you know, threw for 1,387 yards, 19 touchdowns to 3 picks. Losing continuity, especially at quarterback, is always a big deal, right? So we'll just have to see what happens moving forward here. They also lose Gavin Taylor, their 6'3", 250-pound defensive lineman. He was a big force for them. 93 tackles, 23 TFLs, tackles for loss, along with a team-high 9 sacks there. So he was extremely productive for this squad here. Wasn't the lead tackler, but was the third leading tackler for the squad. And they're also losing their 5th leading tackler for the squad in Max Werderman. He had 58 tackles, 8 tackles for loss as a starting corner, so he will be missed. Altogether on defense, not too bad here, graduating 4 of their top 13 tacklers. So there you go. And then the offense looks to stay the same. Obviously, you're losing Gavin Taylor and Brookhart, though. So there you go. But other than that, you bring back everyone else, I believe. So, yeah. Now, key players to talk about. Let's start on defense here, starting with Nate Sandy here. The 6', 205-pound senior incoming linebacker had a breakout season, leading the team in tackles with 107, 12 tackles for loss, and 3 interceptions. He will be one of the leaders going into next year here at linebacker. I do want to shout out another linebacker who unfortunately got his season cut a little bit short after... Maybe it wasn't the second game, but it felt really early on in the season. In Eli Frakes here, suffered a tough knee injury, but he should be coming back here better than ever. I think he's really underrated. He just has struggled with injuries, as in like last year, and I think coming back here, he should also bring some good experience. So there you go, though. It's not like he's totally inexperienced, so that's another linebacker you bring back. So there you go. That is some guys to look out for on defense here. Or actually, sorry, let me shout out more guys here on defense. Wyatt Bristow, he's a good defensive tackle. He should be coming back. Jamar Yancey, I believe, is an edge rusher. He should be coming back. Lucas Benendorf and Jack Volpe, believe 2 secondary guys, should be coming back as well. All guys that really didn't get to play last year, whether it was injury or grades or whatever, they should be back. They contributed at some point, in the season, whether it was the last one or the year before, I want to say, but those are all talented guys to definitely look out for, along with the rest of the guys that are coming back, obviously. So there you go. That's the defense. I think this legend defense will actually be pretty good this season. Now, let's talk about, probably their strongest position group here, and that is running back. They got 3 running backs who are all extremely talented, and Alex Martinez, Jaden Lawrence, and Ryken Banks. This trio is the best running back stable in Colorado, hands down. Martinez did lead the way with 1,108 yards, 14 touchdowns, while catching 29 receptions, 222 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But Jaden Lawrence, who missed some games early, I want to say, was actually the second leading rusher with 443 yards and 6 touchdowns on only 39 carries. So that's 11.4 yards carry there for Jaden Lawrence. And I think Jaden Lawrence might actually be one of the better athletes here, so don't be surprised if he leapfrogs Martinez, but I definitely see both of those guys getting in the mix. I also see, freshman standout, now incoming junior, Ryken Banks, getting into the mix here. I mean, he had 250 yards and 2 touchdowns on 34 carries. That's 7.4 yards a pop. He's extremely talented. Remember watching him in his Parker Hawk days. I said last year, don't be surprised if he comes onto the team and gets some snaps here. And he did. He did. So I was definitely right about that. And I think he's another guy that could really turn up as well and also be a workhorse. He had a pretty solid playoff game against Pooter, I want to say here. Let me make sure I bring up the stats here from that Pooter game. But in that Pooter game, he had 10 carries for 87 yards. That's definitely big time. I guess his other biggest game was against Pomona, where he only had 7 carries but went for 74 yards and a touchdown. So this kid's definitely been talented. He is the next guy up, but there are 2 really good backs in Martinez and Lawrence in front of him, who will be huge as well here. Lawrence will be a junior, Martinez a senior. We'll just have to see how that works out. Honestly, though, do not be surprised if this group amasses well over 2,000 total yards. There is a year, I would say there is also a dimension, not a year, but there is a dimension where, they amass 3,000 yards between them, and they just go crazy since they are returning a solid amount of their line. So we'll just have to see. But I think this group really makes them contenders this year. So there you go. They also bring back Brian Doyle. The incoming senior was their lead receiver, actually, with 26 receptions. And he was really productive, going for 505 yards and 6 touchdowns there. Also, by the way, Jaden Lawrence was their second leading receiver with 26 receptions, 344 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So just keep that in mind. He'll be used in the passing game as well. Also, look out for Jeff Baca here. Hopefully I'm saying that name right. But he's a speedy receiver who, got a lot more snaps on defense, but I kind of anticipate him to potentially get more on offense as well. He adds another receiving threat over there. Now, at quarterback, right, before we talk about offensive line, I want to talk about quarterback here. There are 3 guys who I think will be fighting for that role. You have incoming sophomore Michael Marcinich. You have incoming, I want to say junior here. Yep, junior in Champ Jones. And then you have Nick Farley, who will also be an incoming junior as well. He started some games last year as a sophomore when Brookhart went down. Farley, that is. And he was all right. He threw for 151 yards against Regis Jesuit. Against Pine Creek, I think that was his first starting game. He was not good. 5 of 21 for 113 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Against Douglas County, he was all right. 12 of 22 for 208 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Against Pooter, they didn't really throw the ball. I'm pretty sure it was kind of tougher weather over there, so they couldn't possibly have thrown it as much. So there's that. He's in the mix. We'll see what happens, though. I did say this last year, though. I really like Michael Marcinich. I thought he could potentially have gotten the start as a freshman. If you look at his film from his freshman year, it looks really good. I think he can play varsity right now, honestly, and has been able to. We'll just have to see what happens here. With whatever quarterback you get back, you're kind of just plugging him in, telling him, hey, don't make too many mistakes. You have a bunch of great running backs. You have some solid receivers and a good defense, Be a game manager, right? And if they could develop into something more than that, then that would be ideal. So it'll be interesting to see who wins that quarterback matchup. I have heard a couple different things. We'll just see what happens. Now let's talk about the offensive line here. They return Logan White. He's an incoming senior, 6'2", 275 here. I want to say tackle. I could be wrong here, but he's a really good lineman for them. I'm pretty sure he's a watch list guy for us as well. They also bring back Cruz Garcia, another incoming senior, 6'3", 260. Might be a bit bigger here. He's an interior offensive lineman, another watch list guy for us. He should be a big-time contributor on the offensive line here. So those are 2 guys that I know they're going to kind of build or have their offensive line revolve around there. There is also I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't know if he's going to get playing time this year, but there's a player, he's an incoming sophomore in Gage Turnbull, who's now 6'5", 270. He was a bigger kid as a freshman as well at 6'5", 260 or so. He may not get a ton of playing time, but he's definitely somebody that might be slotted into the offensive line or on the defensive line. We will definitely have to see, but he is part of that extremely talented group of players, a freshman that I mentioned last year and kind of got backlash about last year, which is fine, but, they're still talented, and don't be surprised if they contribute this year. So there you go. But altogether, a lot of guys for Legend to talk about here. As far as guys who are, some of the best of the state, they got a lot of watch list guys. I think they're a top 2 or 3 team when it comes to number of players on our watch list, which, by the way, make sure you check those out. Those are releasing right now, position by position. So we'll just have to see what happens. The talent is not a problem for Legend this season, at least proven talent. So to start, they play Vista Ridge. That should definitely be a dub. I don't think it'll be as close as last year. Legend should get off to a hot start here and go ahead and win this game. This will be a good one. I might be looking to go to this one. We'll have to see, but yeah, that'll be a good one for sure. Then they play Pomona away. It doesn't matter, though. I think that's an easy dub there. Same with Castleview. That should be another easy dub. Then they play Ponderosa. This should be a fun one, I think. Pondo, really got them last year, but I think Legend definitely wins it this year with the talent they have. Ponderosa, I am concerned about what they have going on there at quarterback, and this is a team that I'm going to talk about here at the end, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I will talk more about Ponderosa in this matchup later here. So there you go. Then they play Legacy. This could potentially be a trap game. They're a very good team, but I still think this is a game they should for sure win. I feel like Legend is just deeper than them here. But if they lose, it's because they got outcoached. I'm just going to be honest, which is possible. So it could go either way. But I think Legend is definitely more talented. So there you go. Then they play Chaparral. That should be a dub. Fountain Fort Carson should be a dub as well here. They should be able to outscore Fountain Fort Carson. Defensively, Fountain Fort Carson won't quite be the same. So we'll just have to see there. Pine Creek, I think that's a win for Legend there. Will be a tough game. Another one that I could potentially see them losing here. But if they limit the turnovers, this is a game I expect them to win. And by the way, their quarterback, whoever it is, cannot be rattled in this game. You got to stand tall against the Eagles. You got to trust your team. At this point in the season, you should be able to do that. And so I think this might be a telling game, but I'm going to give them this win. Then they play Regis Jesuit. I think that's a win. Regis is losing a lot here. Maybe it's a little bit more challenging since they're playing them at the end. But, like at the end of the season, But I still think that's a win for Legend. They should be able to run the ball well and, open up the pass too and hopefully get something there. So there you go there. And if not, your defense should be able to stop an offense that, is going to be inexperienced. So there you go. Then they play Douglas County. That should definitely be a win. So I am flipping the script on Legend. 10-0 is my predicted record for them this season with a window of wins between 7 and 10. The pressure's on. I think this team is one of the most talented teams in the state and can win state this year. But historically, they have struggled against other contenders in the playoffs. I know there is an article out there, not, written by us, obviously, but there is an article out there about how they've struggled against top seeds. You literally cannot do that. And so that's why I look at some games like Legacy, Pine Creek as Regis kind of being their potential losses here. And if they lose, it's because they're outcoached, plain and simple, because they have too much talent to lose, in my opinion. So we're just going to have to see what happens moving forward here. Regardless, we're talking about regular season, right? I'm not going to project all the way into playoffs. We'll do that at the end of the regular season here. I think they go undefeated. At the very least, maybe they win 7 games. Even then, that's kind of low here. I think they are much closer to that 8 or 9, 10 games here, and I think they're definitely a top 5 team in 5A right now. Just looking at the defense they bring back, they should be good. I like their linebackers. I like their front seven there. Same with their secondary. I have a lot of faith in their secondary, which I think is really underrated. Their offensive line should be good. They have 3 running backs who are all really good. So even if one gets hurt, you have 2 more, but, obviously knocking on wood that none of them get hurt there. You have some solid receivers as well. Brian Doyle, I think, is really underrated, along with Jeff Baca, and they could be due for big seasons here. At quarterback, hey, it could be worse. You could definitely have a worse quarterback situation than Michael Barsinich, Champ Jones, and Nick Farley. There are a lot of worse quarterback rooms in Colorado. You got to go with one, though, obviously. You can't keep the carousel up for the whole season. And I think with whoever they pick, they should be fine. And if they're not, then replace them. And then you have to stick with them moving forward, right? But we'll just have to see what happens there. And so just a lot of talent here. I mean, one of the most complete rosters. We'll just have to see what happens this season. But hey, pressure's definitely on. I admit to being wrong. But, I don't think I'm going to be wrong this season, though. So there you go there. All right, let's talk about Ponderosa. Pondo here. Predicted them to go 6-4, but did give them a wins of 5-7 here. They exceeded expectations in the regular season, going 8-2. So that's just one game outside of my window of wins here. So not in the ballpark, but definitely still in the neighborhood still, which I'll take. But let's go down the line here and talk about this season, which was really special for Ponderosa, I would say. But to start out, they had an upset win over Erie, 39-27 to start the season, which honestly I wasn't sure about their offense to start. I think that was my biggest question about Pondo to start here. But they really stepped up and made a statement here, and so showed that they'd be in a really good spot here. Then they got another statement win, which more or less, I think I was just wrong about Chaparral though, but they beat them 44-6, which was absolutely huge. Then the rest of their schedule pretty much went exactly how I predicted. From there, beat Golden 56-7. That was a huge one there, but they still beat him. Beat Legend. This was a big crosstown rivalry here. Beat them 21-14 in a minute. I thought Legend wasn't going to be ready for this game, and they weren't, so they beat him. Then they played Palmer Ridge. This one kind of got away from them. I thought it would be a little bit closer here, but they lost to them 48-34. Denver South, that was another game that kind of got away from them. Myself and Cody went to that game. Also, I think, once again, I went to their homecoming game. So that's like 2 years in a row where I've went to Pondo homecoming games. I'll probably make it 3 years in a row. I'm not going to lie. And I don't even know when they are. I just happen to be showing up. So that's, yeah, whatever. Side tangent. Lost to them 30-17 there. That was also a game where they had some injuries. I don't know if Zach Stryker was 100%, so they tried some other things, didn't work. They lost 32-17. Still closer than, it looked. Then they beat Vista Peak, Far Northeast, and Thomas Jefferson as expected there. Vista Peak 35-6, Far Northeast 55-27. Geez. Then Thomas Jefferson was a really close 7-6 win there, but still beat them. Then they beat Bear Creek to end the season here 49-7. So really good regular season. In the playoffs, they got cooking here. They beat Pueblo West 33-14. I want to say, as surprising as that was, Max Mervin was at quarterback in this game because Stryker was once again out for the majority of it. So I'm pretty sure Max Mervin got some good snaps there. And then they played Erie, who they lost to 43-25. One of the craziest games of the season for sure here. Cody was talking to us about it. I think myself and Gideon were driving home when it happened. But, this was a game where Ponderosa, they were up 25-8 at halftime. And then Erie stormed back here, starting with Blake Barnett scoring a rushing touchdown in the third. And, they got the conversion as well. Then they would get another rushing touchdown by Ward here to make it 22-25. Then Blake Barnett threw another touchdown. So that's 3 touchdowns in the third quarter, which is wild in the third, to take the lead 29-25. And then they really didn't look back after that here. That is 4 touchdowns in the third quarter, as Blake Barnett would actually score another one near the end here. Golly, man, what the heck? And yeah, it just wasn't super close from there. I think Pondo would score maybe one more, or no, they would not. So Ponderosa just got shut out the entire second half, while Erie scored like 5 or 4 touchdowns in that second half of the playoffs. So definitely a little weird, honestly, a little disappointing for Ponderosa, but still, though, a good season regardless. I think you could still be happy with how the season went for the most part. I know there were some injury concerns and stuff kind of at the end, so it is what it is, right? But let's talk about some of the seniors. They are losing, starting with Zach Stryker. He was honestly a real key piece of this offense, where he threw for 1,431 yards, 16 touchdowns to 11 picks here, but at a pretty efficient 63% clip. Also ran for 815 yards and 10 touchdowns on the ground, and was the lead rusher for this squad here. So there you go. That was kind of a really important piece to this offense, and so when he kind of got dinged up near the end of the season and in the playoffs, it did affect Ponderosa just a little bit there. So there you go. But we did get a taste of how this team would look without Zach Stryker, though. So just throwing all that out there. They are also losing Liam Edwards. He was a big two-way athlete for Ponderosa. He also made our top 5 list as a cornerback and will be playing football at the next level here. So that's huge for them. Huge for him, but he caught 42 receptions for 582 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns, and then on defense had 37 tackles. Another team in interceptions, it looks like here, with 5 interceptions on the season. So it's definitely gonna suck losing one of their speedsters. Also had 6 pass deflections, but anyways, it's definitely gonna suck losing one of their best athletes here in Liam Edwards, since he did so much both on offense and defense for this squad here. I want to say, by the way, on offense, he was their lead receiver, which he was. So there you go. Now they also lose Cape Olson. He was another guy who made our top 5 seniors linebacker list. Not quarterback, linebackers list. And I want to say he was an all Playmaker guy and a defensive player of the year candidate for us as well, if not the winner. But he's a tough replace. I mean, Cape Olson will be playing football on the next level too, by the way. But he had 177 tackles, 28 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and 14 hurries, which, he was just extremely productive and was one of the main focal points of this defense, who just turned up all the way for Ponderosa. So that's going to be a really hard replace as well. They also lose Ethan Rodriguez, who was their main running back and was their second leading rusher. Rodriguez, that was. He rushed for 679 yards and 9 touchdowns. And then on defense was really productive as well, producing 98 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 4 forced fumbles there. And so that's another tough loss for this defense here. Altogether, when talking about this defense, they're losing 8 of their top 13 tacklers, a defense that was huge for them and they really leaned on throughout this last season. And they're also losing some linemen in Ryan Thompson and Jack Taylor as well. So losing at least 2 offensive linemen, starters up front, will be tough. But they do return some good key players here, starting with Weston Hofschneider. He will be an incoming senior this year, the 5'11", 205-pound edge rusher. He was super productive with 99 tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. He was the 3rd leading tackler for the squad, so for him to return, that will obviously be big. They also returned their 2nd leading tackler and incoming senior, Blake Branham, the 5'11", 190-ish pound middle linebacker, was super productive, tallying 113 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 4 picks. Tied for 2nd in interceptions, by the way, as the 2nd leading tackler. His return is huge for this Pondo defense, and he's just a really good linebacker in general. Great speed, good tackler, a really good cover guy as well. So definitely somebody who could rack up a lot of interceptions too. So those are two players that they should be kind of building this defense around here, which isn't bad at all. They also bring back Carson Keach here, a 6'2", 180-pound senior, finished just behind Max Mervin, so he's the third leading receiver on offense with 436 yards, 6 receiving touchdowns on 25 receptions, so he will be returning as one of the main receivers on offense, but on defense was huge as well. At safety, tallying 78 tackles, 3 pass deflections, 4 interceptions, which he's the other guy along with Branham who was tied there in interceptions, and so he will be another big part of this of this defense here returning. And by the way, he's now 6'3", 197 pounds. He also just received his first offer from Utah Tech not too long ago, which is a D1. So he's a great player, big player for Ponderosa here. And so between those three guys, Hofschneider, Branham, and Keach, this defense should still be tough. Now, they also return standout receiver and athlete all around, Max Swervin Mervin here. And, he played as well as he could with a first-year starter and striker. At receiver, he is such a playmaker. This season, he caught 37 receptions for 469 yards and 7 touchdowns, leading the team with 7 touchdowns there. He's a dynamic receiver, right? So he's big time. But when Striker went down, he was actually put in at quarterback here, which does make things interesting. In 2 games, he passed for 256 yards and 5 touchdowns to only 1 interception, while also rushing for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns on 23 carries in those 2 games. Now, I have no idea what Pondo will do at quarterback this season. I didn't know last year either. But there are a couple candidates for this position, and I think Max Mervin might be somebody going into only his junior year. He's been starting since he was a freshman, but going into his junior year, he could potentially take over here, which would make things very interesting for Ponderosa. But you got to think as well, that is a receiving threat that you are losing. You still have Carson Keach, who's big time as well, but it would be even better to have both Keach and Mervin out there catching passes, helping out their quarterback. So just keep an eye out. He could potentially get moved out there, so we'll see what happens. He also played a little bit of corner as well, so he'll be returning on defense there too. Now, another guy on offense to look out for Pondo is Sean Davis, their incoming senior running back here. He's a very speedy back here, rushing 95 times for 544 yards and 3 touchdowns as the third leading rusher here. That's 5.7 yards a pop here. He has some serious speed, and he had some notable performances throughout the season. One against 4 Northeast, where he popped off on 13 rushes for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then against Palmer Ridge, he also rushed 18 times for 98 yards against them. Look for him to take on a bigger role with Rodriguez graduating. He is a talented back who maybe isn't as physically imposing as an Ethan Rodriguez, but he's shifty. He's a tough back to stop in space, and once he gets into open space, most of the time he is gone. So that's going to be another offensive player to kind of help take the load off the defense. Now, before I move on and predict the record here, I do want to mention there is a player named Seven Striker here who also got some snaps at quarterback as a sophomore. He will be entering his junior year. He could potentially be the next guy up. I don't know if he's the brother of a Striker here. I would kind of assume so, but we'll just have to see, I guess. But I think if he was to go into the spot here with the full off season, with the weapons around him, he could be okay, right? And also, he would give you an option at quarterback that'll last more than one season, as they haven't had a quarterback Lasts for more than one season for a couple years now. They've had 3 different quarterbacks in 3 seasons. So just keep that in mind. If they could get a guy really established here, I think Ponderosa could really cook something up moving forward. So there you go. But altogether, still a very talented team. Let's talk about this next season here. To start, they play Fort Collins. I think that's a dub. Chaparral could potentially be a closer one, especially with some questions at quarterback on offense. But that really should be a dub here. I think the defense should still play really well here. Plus, they don't have Braden Monroe. Chaparral doesn't, so that should definitely be a dub. Golden, they got blown out, even with Giselle Riley. Now they don't have him. That should be a win. They play Legend. This will be a really fun game, a potential game we might send somebody out to go to here. They defeated them last year, which was huge for the program, but that Legend team was not the same at the beginning of the season where they first played them than the end of that last season. I think this 2023 season, Legend defeats Ponderosa for the Battle of Parker. Should still be pretty intense and a good one, though. Following that, they play Palmer Ridge, it looks like they just scheduled, on September 21st. I think that's a win for Ponderosa, but that's a close one there. Palmer Ridge, they have a new head coach. They're losing some linemen, a lot of skill players, their entire secondary, it feels like. I think and plus all the running backs too, which is important. I think they beat Palmer Ridge the more that I think about that. So there you go. Then they play Denver South, lost to them last year, but they don't have Capra, they don't have Caldwell. I think that's enough to close the gap here and put them over. I think that's a win. Should still be a fun game, though. Following that, they play Vista Peak. That should be a dub. Far Northeast. That should be a dub there. Thomas Jefferson will run the ball, and they haven't had a great quarterback since Lindgren. And so if you're going to run the ball into a great defense, that's not always the best game plan. So I think that's a dub for Ponderosa there. But Thomas Jefferson will try its best to limit the opportunities for them to score. Following that, they play Bear Creek. Under their head coach, Jaron Cohen, they have never lost to Bear Creek, right? And so I don't think that will begin this year. That should be a win. But that could be a trap game. I'm going to be honest. That could definitely be a trap game, especially at the end of the season. Bear Creek might actually have to win that game to make the playoffs. So that should really be one of the best games at the end of the season, though. And, by then we'll know what this offense looks like and whatnot. And I think Pondo should be good to go when they're healthy. But just keep an eye out for Bear Creek. Regardless, though, I have them going 9-1 here with the window of wins between 7 and 10. Look, despite questions at quarterback, this Pondo program has been consistent. With them returning some key defensive players, I trust that they could fill in the rest of the gaps there. On offense, they have a trio of talented skill players in Keach, Mervin, and Davis. This could be a contending year for Ponderosa if their quarterback situation remains stable here. I think that's the biggest question there. Now, Palmer Ridge, Legend, Bear Creek, Denver South, Shap, to a degree, but not really, are all games I could see them potentially losing here. More so South, Bear Creek, Legend, Palmer Ridge. But I have them favored in all of those games, except for the Legend game, though. So there you go. Regardless, I do think this Ponderosa team will be really good here. They have a good defense, right? They have skill players on offense who can produce with or without a quarterback. Obviously, with one would definitely go a longer way than without him. So we'll just have to see what happens there and if they could work some magic and get some really good production out of their quarterback again this season. So we'll just have to see what happens, but should be a big season for Pondo. Either way, that'll wrap up this episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast. Thank you so much for rocking with us. Make sure to show us some love and follow us on social media at Playmakers Corner on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube as well. We're posting content just like episodes and shorts there too. TikTok, we should be posting some TikToks of these season previews, hopefully. And then follow us on Twitter at Playmaker Corner. We're there as well, posting watch lists and a whole bunch of stuff, as well as more season previews. So with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will catch you later.